Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Friday, the 26th of September. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. It's fabulous to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines today. Korean President Park Geun-hye is back in Seoul after wrapping up a state visit to Canada and a trip to the 69th UN General Assembly in New York. Speculation grows about North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's health as he was absent from his customary seat as the country convened its rubber stamp parliament. Kim hasn't been seen in public in over 3 weeks. Plus, France and the United States strike more Islamic State targets in Iraq and Syria as Britain announces it will join the US-led coalition to fight the militants. Our top story this morning, President Park Geun-hye returned from her trip to Canada and the United Nations earlier this Friday. At her debut at the UN General Assembly, the South Korean president sought international support for her North Korea and unification policies. She also highlighted the gravity of human rights abuses that exist in the North. At high-level meetings concerning global issues, namely climate change, international terrorism and education, President Park promoted Korea's contributions as a major middle power and vowed to do more to make a difference in the world. And on a state visit to Canada, Seoul signed a bilateral free trade agreement with Ottawa, and the two leaders elevated their ties to a strategic partnership. North of the border now, and top party and government officials in North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly met on Thursday. For the second time this year, North Korea's young leader Kim Jong-un, however, was not present. The last time Kim appeared in public, which was some 3 weeks ago, he was seen limping, and this is fueling wild rumors about his health. Shin Se-min reports.
It was a no-show for the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the 13th Supreme People's Assembly held on Thursday, and the absence is fueling speculations about his health. The young leader Kim, who has not been seen in public since September 3rd, missed a meeting for the first time since he took power in 2011. Several weeks of absence has stirred up questions about Kim's possible health problems, as he has been seen walking with a limp in recent news reports released by the state media. North Korea, however, replaced its Vice Chairman Choi Ryong-hae of the National Defense Commission to Hwang Byung-seo, the director of the all-powerful General Political Bureau of Pyongyang's Korean People's Army. Choi, once a key confidant of North Korean leader, succeeding Kim's uncle Chang Sung-taek, has been dismissed from his seat. The day-long meeting has brought together some 650 delegates to approve some of the key public policy and legal measures, along with overhauling the country's mandatory schooling and conscription systems. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, more than a month has passed since Seoul proposed holding high-level talks with Pyongyang over pending inter-Korean issues. That offer remains on the table, but the North has yet to give an answer. Wanting to get the ball rolling, Seoul's unification minister renewed that offer on Thursday. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Speaking at a forum in Seoul on Thursday, South Korea's top policymaker for inter-Korean affairs had a message for North Korea.
In order to solve pending issues, South and North Korea must put their heads together, see each other, and talk. Our government is willing to discuss all issues brought to the table.
North Korea has been sitting on a South Korean offer for high-level talks made last month, saying Seoul must first stop civic activists from flying anti-Pyongyang leaflets before any meetings can take place. Unification Minister Ryu Gil-jae also noted the importance of international cooperation in preparing for reunification. He said more economic projects like the Najin-Hassan Railway project with the two Koreas and Russia are under consideration.
We think a five-way project involving the two Koreas, China, Russia, and Japan is also possible.
Touching upon President Park Geun-hye's speech at the United Nations, Ryu also promised efforts to improve the dire human rights situation in North Korea and to expand humanitarian aid. But with no concrete progress made in inter-Korean relations so far, some are calling Ryu's plans unrealistic. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now, while the UN General Assembly continues in New York City, members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN as they're more commonly known, are meeting this week in Seoul to do their part in peacekeeping cooperation. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The three-day ASEAN Defense Ministers Plus meeting enters its last day on Friday, with ministers and defense representatives from 18 nations across the Asia-Pacific taking part. They have come to enhance cooperation in United Nations peacekeeping efforts around the globe.
Our goal here is to kind of show other fellow Asian countries what we've been doing and what we have accomplished in the past, and also to learn from them as well. I mean, there are countries with, say, Indonesia, the US, and other countries who have expertise in this field.
This is one of 6 ASEAN defense conferences this year. Each one has a specific focus, with this week's being on peacekeeping. To get a better understanding of Korea's peacekeeping strategies, the group visited Korea's International Peace Corps on Thursday.
And the purpose was, from our side, to come and provide an update on the current trends, challenges, and priorities in UN peacekeeping operations around the world. We were also willing to provide a few updates on current challenges in our field missions.
Korea is known for its defense capabilities among ASEAN member nations. Since 1993, Korea has been an active participant in UN peacekeeping operations around the globe. Over that time, a total of 17 countries and over 12,000 troops have been deployed to different corners of the world, including Iraq and Somalia. On Friday, a defense representative from each country will discuss ways to increase cooperation by sharing strategic information to enhance peacekeeping operations on foreign soil. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida sat down for talks in New York City on Thursday local time, within the last few hours, in fact, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Now, no details have been released, but they were expected to exchange views on ways on setting up a meeting between their respective leaders. This was the second meeting by the foreign ministers in less than 2 months, but it carries much more significance this time as it follows Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's personal letter to President Park Geun-hye expressing his wish officially for a summit sometime this fall. President Park has not held private bilateral talks with the Japanese leader. She says he must first apologize for Tokyo's wartime atrocities. An expert from the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is to make his first official visit to South Korea next Monday to evaluate the situation of racism and discrimination in this country. United Nations Special Rapporteur Mutuma Rutiere says he plans to learn more about the efforts undertaken by the Korean government to try and combat racism and other forms of discrimination. During his week-long visit, the expert is scheduled to meet with the country's representatives of the legislative and judicial branches, UN agencies, the National Human Rights Commission of Korea, as well as a broad range of civil servants. The human rights expert will then hold a press conference at the end of his visit, during which he will present his preliminary findings and recommendations, and then a final report on the visit will be presented to the UN Human Rights Council next year.
Said that a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. Now, in some economic news, Korea's consumer sentiment remained flat in September, marking another month that it has failed to recover to the level seen before the Seoul-Ho ferry disaster in April. The Bank of Korea says the country's consumer sentiment index stood at 107 in September. That's unchanged from the previous month. The figure remains below the 108 level recorded just before the ferry sinking. The monthly index reflects the overall economic outlook of consumers, their living conditions and future spending plans. A reading above 100 means, though, that optimists still outnumber pessimists. Now, they're the two biggest companies in the entire countries, and as Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motors' fortunes go, so does that of the Korean stock market. And with the two giants in recent months turning in but rather poor performances in a number of areas, the local bourse, the Kospi, has taken a hit. Connie Kim reports.
Poor performances from Korea's top two companies are reshaping the country's stock market. The share movement of Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor used to dictate the trend of the Korean bourse, but their influence has diminished recently, with many other companies moving in the other direction. Samsung and Hyundai peaked at a combined 25% of overall market capitalization in June, but the dramatic drops in their share prices in recent months have knocked their combined share value down to less than 16%. Roughly $60 billion have been wiped off the valuation of the two companies in the past year. In contrast, companies specializing in communications, textiles, apparel, banking, and other financial sectors have seen their prices go up by more than 20% in less than 3 months. This is partly because the Korean government began injecting $25 billion into the economy to spur domestic spending and accelerate a recovery. The poor performances from Samsung and Hyundai are being blamed on the strengthened Korean currency and other structural problems.
In the case of Samsung, the smartphone market worldwide has reached its saturation point, leading to a decrease in exports of Samsung handsets. Hyundai's recent purchase of land in Seoul for $10 billion has spurred worries of the company's cash flows.
Many component makers in the auto and electronics industries have seen their shares drop by more than 10% over the past 3 months. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Now, despite having the funds to live a little, households in Korea preferred to stick their money away in the bank for a rainy day, at least during the April to June period. Data by the Bank of Korea shows the financial surplus held by households and non-profit organizations swelled by more than $4 billion in the second quarter to $28.3 billion. This is the fourth straight quarter of increase. This essentially means an extra few $1 billion were held back for later use rather than being spent on various things. The central bank says sluggish domestic consumption was the main reason for the disappointing growth rate in Korea in the second quarter. It edged up a mere 0.5% on quarter, the lowest growth in nearly 2 years. And Korea's individual debt-to-GDP ratio has come in at the highest in the whole of Asia. This according to insurance group Allianz's Global Wealth Report. Korea's ratio stood at 93% last year, when the average of the 53 Asian countries surveyed stood at around 65%. This report warned of household debt default starting with the working class for countries like Korea if interest rates go up or if the economic growth slows. Now, it's been an extremely difficult few days for Apple. When the company said the new iPhone would change the shape of smartphones, consumers didn't actually expect their new phones to actually bend. Apple's customers have complained that the devices bend after having them in their pockets. They found the larger iPhone 6 Plus was the most prone to this curving. Others were furious to find their new iPhones were not working after an operating system upgrade, and this is the software that runs the handsets. Analysts say the bending issue has become inherent with these newer mobile devices as companies race to put out sleeker and more lightweight designs. On the software issue, Apple has said it is very sorry for the inconvenience and that they are working around the clock to fix that problem. Nothing official yet about the bending issue, though, although some IT experts say users should exercise a little common sense when using these kind of phones and avoid putting an expensive piece of hardware in their back pocket. Right, well, let's take a look at the international headlines we're following on this Friday morning. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim at the News Centre. Hello there, Eunice.
Good morning, Mark.
So we're seeing a build-up in the US-led coalition against Islamic State, which, not least of which, is Britain, in fact. There's a very good possibility they're going to be joining airstrikes against IS targets in Iraq.
That's right, Mark. The British Parliament is expected to debate that very call by Prime Minister David Cameron later on this Friday. This as U.S. authorities say they believe they have zeroed in on the masked IS militant who had beheaded 2 American journalists and a British aid worker. Our Kim Ji-yeon tells us more on these developments.
The U.S.-led coalition fighting Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria is making some progress. During a briefing with reporters in Washington, FBI Director James Comey said that the U.S. has determined the identity of the militant who beheaded 2 American journalists and a British aid worker in Syria, but he would not be drawn on releasing his name to the media just yet. The videotaped beheadings of Americans James Foley and Steven Sotloff were major factors in U.S. President Barack Obama's decision to strike IS militarily, with the group's main strongholds in Syria the main targets of U.S. airstrikes this week. The Pentagon on Thursday released a video of its airstrikes against the Mayadeen module refinery, a target that's under IS control in eastern Syria. Attacks on oil refineries are intended to undermine the group's ability to finance itself from oil sales. The U.S.-led coalition to fight the extremist group is gaining momentum, as Britain announced on Thursday that it would join. Prime Minister David Cameron is waiting for Parliament to grant its official approval. Other Western allies of the U.S., including France, Australia, Belgium, and the Netherlands, have agreed to join the airstrikes in Iraq. But despite these developments, the Pentagon says it's too early to say whether the U.S.-led coalition is winning against the IS. A spokesperson pointed to Islamic State's continued access to financing, volunteers, and weapons, even after the aerial bombing campaign against them began last month. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And speaking of Prime Minister David Cameron, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, the leaders of the UK and Iran met face-to-face in a first such high-level contact since Iran's Islamic Revolution 35 years ago. Prime Minister David Cameron and President Hassan Rouhani exchanged views on the fight against Islamic State extremists. The Iranian leader, under pressure for his country's nuclear program, expressed criticism of the U.S.-led campaign in Iraq and Syria, saying bombing and airstrikes only feed terrorism. But he also suggested a readiness to work with Washington as long as the U.S. could move beyond, quote, insignificant fears that his country seeks nuclear arms. Speaking at a high-level meeting on the Ebola crisis, U.S. President Barack Obama said the world's response to the outbreak is too little and too slow. UN Chief Park Geun-hye said a 20-fold boost in aid is needed, as World Bank President Jim Kim said his group would nearly double its financing commitment to $400 million to get urgently needed staff and resources to the affected sites. One of the hardest-hit West African states, Sierra Leone, sealed off another district Thursday in a desperate move to contain the epidemic, effectively placing some 1/3 of its populace under quarantine. And Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko, who did not attend the UN General Assembly, said his government is preparing a broad plan to apply for EU membership by the year 2020. He said the plan would include development strategies as well as social and economic reforms. The move would follow the former Soviet Republic's landmark agreement for closer ties with the EU ratified last Tuesday. Poroshenko added a ceasefire struck with pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine earlier this month appears to be working.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we continue on with our 2014 Incheon Asian Games coverage, starting off with the men's vault final where South Korea's Yang Ak-sun faced off against North Korea's Lee Se-kwang for the gold medal. But in a shocking twist of event, Yang Ak-sun, who went with the Lopez instead of the Yang 2 in the second attempt, finished with a final average score of 15.200, while Hong Kong's Shek Wai-hung surprises everyone with a 15.216 average, beating the Olympic champion for the gold medal. Meanwhile, North Korea's Lee Se-kwang failed to make the podium as he finished fourth with a final average score of 14.799. And now moving over to the men's 100-meter freestyle swing event as Park Geun-hye went after his first gold medal in Incheon. Now, despite a slow start in the first 50-meter of the event, Park Geun-hye would storm back in the final lap and finish second with a final time of 48.75 seconds, giving him the silver medal. Silver medal finish gives him his 19th Asian Games medal, tying the Korean record. Meanwhile, China's Ling Zhe-tao finished first with an Asian record of 47.70 seconds, giving him the gold medal finish. Now, Thursday was a great day for South Korea as a couple of world records were broken on the day, and one of those records were broken in the women's team compound archery event. Now, facing off against Laos, the South Korean women's compound team, which consists of Seok Ji-yeon, Choi Bo-min, and Kim Yoon-hee, scored a combined 238 points out of a possible 240 points to shatter the previous world record of 236, which was set by the U.S. team back in 2011. Meanwhile, the team went on to beat Iran in the semifinal later on the day to advance to the final. Now, another world record was shattered on Thursday, this time over in the women's double trap event when 34-year-old Kim Mi-jin set a new world record en route to her gold medal finish. With the women's double trap event being recognized for the first time by the International Shooting Sports Federation during the Incheon Asian Games, South Korea's Kim Mi-jin scores 110 points to set a new world record, giving her the gold medal. The world record score edged out China's Zhang Weifei, who scored 108 points, and Bang Ye-ting, who finished with the bronze medal with 107 points. And now shifting over to rowing, Kim Ye-ji added South Korea's second ever gold medal in rowing on Wednesday, but let's make that number 3 for Korea after Ji Yoo-jin added another gold medal on Thursday. Ji Yoo-jin, competing in the women's lightweight single sculls event, finishes first with a final time of 8 minutes 1 second, edging out Hong Kong's Lee Kai-man by 5.6 seconds. The first gold medal in rowing for Korea came in 2006 during the Doha Asian Games when Shin Eun-chul claimed men's single scull gold. Now, quite a busy day on Thursday with North Korea's Kim Eun-ju breaking the clean and jerk world record in the women's 75-kilogram weightlifting competition, adding to their impressive gold medal run in the sport. So let's now finish off by taking a look at how the medal standings look so far. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. The whole nation is under mostly to partly cloudy skies, and clouds will continue to hover up the peninsula throughout the day, so it should be a bit cloudier than yesterday. And the top temperature will be lower than yesterday as well, but it's still a nice autumn day on tap for us, with highs hovering in the mid-20s. So let's take a closer look at today's temperatures. Now, the daytime high in Seoul and Daegu will be rising to 26, while Gwangju and Busan will top out at 28 and 25 respectively. And for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon should see highs of 24 and 25, while Dokdo peaks at 21. Now, weather in Incheon, the host city of Asian Games, is shaping up to be a nice one as well, though slightly cooler than Seoul, topping out at 24 this afternoon. And the fall is in full swing, and so is the nationwide autumn festivals. Thankfully, the weather should cooperate this weekend, so go ahead and enjoy. But do notice temperature difference between lows and highs. Dress accordingly to avoid getting a cold. Now, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
all we have for now. Enjoy the rest of your Friday wherever you're watching us, and stay tuned to Arirang. We'll be back again for our next newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.